For a very long time, films were either one of two things, based upon something before and something purely original. Now, this has always been the case, and still very much is. Of course, now we've sort of evolved a little bit. Now things that are based on other things are also based on previous movies, whether or not they be original. So sequels certainly are a big part about media nowadays, whether they be sequel TV shows or sequel to TV shows that are movies, or sequel to TV shows that are TV shows, or sequel to movies that are movies. Hopefully, more than likely you've seen some sort of sequel, and more than likely through that, some sort of adaptation of something that was made in either a movie or a TV show. More than likely, a lot of these things come from, again, other TV shows that they've made into movies, such as the Mission Impossible movies, which are originally a TV show, which I believe it shares continuity with, at least that's the implication. Speaking of which, they're making another, because they'll never stop making it, because naturally Tom Cruise is in fact an immortal mummy person. But that's besides the fact. Video games are part of the many things that have been adapted into TV shows and movies throughout the many years that they have been around. There has been video game adaptations all the way since the first theatrical video game adaptation with the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and they've made them so many times that eventually we've Ouroboros around back to another Mario movie, and as I've made in a previous video, it's so much better than it used to be. And the question is, why? Why are we suddenly getting much better video game adaptations in now movies and especially TV shows? Well, there's a couple things that have ultimately changed in the many years since, both in terms of our understanding, in terms of what should be adapted and how it should be adapted, and more importantly, video games themselves. Today we're mainly going to be focusing on why exactly the Last of Us TV show is as great as it is due to these sorts of rules. Before we really get into it, we gotta talk about what exactly did and didn't work for decades, 30 years of movies, and why they failed so hard.
Mario, swing your arms from side to side.
As it was originally, for the first several years of adaptations of video games, this was during a time where, well, we were kind of just getting out of the arcades. The Mario movie was coming after Mario. This was after Super Mario Land and World, and we didn't really have a lot of, media that could talk about the exact composition of the characters and their personalities. I can pull a video about this, but it was the same thing for the other stuff. Street Fighter had very basic descriptions, and honestly a lot of its lore, which is a thing I'm gonna work on at some point pretty soon, by the way. The closest thing to any actual storyline was Mortal Kombat, which during this time was in its third game, and had basically begun this big trilogy of storylines, which it was gonna try and more or less continue. The people behind that have a whole other story to tell in terms of why things didn't work out, but
too bad you will die.
Damn, did they try to make sure that they actually felt like they were part of the video game. Because there was actually something to adapt at that point. As we got on into the mid-2000s, there was a little bit more about video games, their storylines, how things connect into each other, and video games, though they weren't necessarily big on narrative as much as they would be in the years oncoming, there was something there to talk about. This is what makes Lara Croft Tomb Raider much better, and probably the best video game movie, besides Mortal Kombat obviously, which is still fantastic because it's just fun, because it really actually tries to be like the video game it's adapting. Now the real question is, what happened for the next 15 years? Because honestly, there's not a good adaptation till Warcraft. This is of two things that are ultimately also the reason why Lara Croft Tomb Raider and Mortal Kombat are as fun as they are decades later. Here's the thing. Silent Hill, DOA, and Prince of Persia: Sands of Time are all movies that do attempt to bring in stuff from the video games into the actual movie. They have the characters, they have the basic plot points, and they have more or less what makes them recognizably those video games, or at least those video game franchises. Well, everything around it either tried too hard to be its whole own thing with small little drops of continuity from the video games, ooh, tee-hee, here you go. I mean, God, this could be an entire little sub-point of the Resident Evil movies are really not good because they're not Resident Evil movies. They are, tee-hee, I want to make my own wife the main character of a series of movies, haha, and then he gets away with it. He can't keep getting away with it, so they stopped letting him. Until they let him make a friggin' Monster Hunter movie, which is the same thing. In general, they're only enjoyable due to how absolutely absurd they are, because they really aren't Resident Evil stuff. As absurd as Resident Evil is, it doesn't have clone army controlled by psychic powers in a facility of clones. But all of them, even if they have some kind of recognizable distinction that makes them look like the video games like DOA or Hitman, they all try to just do their own thing, and they treat the characters as entirely new characters, as if they just really wanted to make their own movie, and they just used it the guise of making a video game-based movie, which doesn't really fit all that well. Some of them can be fun. I love me 2006's DOA, Dead or Alive. Oh my god, is it stupid. I love it so much. But listen, as a person who loves those games, for the plot, I promise, for the plot, I know enough about these characters. I know enough about the Hitman characters and its sort of plot that's around there. And god, do I know enough about Doom to know that that movie sucks ass. And that's because just due to the fact that it's the 2000s, and god knows, same goes for the early 2010s, they're just seeped in what worked for their times. All of these movies just ooze the absolute weird stuff that was during the 2000s of everyone tried to be like the Matrix for a bit, and that just isn't what the Mortal Kombat and Lara Croft movies did. They genuinely tried, though they did go their own direction with certain things. They tried to make their movies recognizably look the way it should in video games, and that's sort of the way things should go. This is both the problem and also the solution to making a video game movie. You need to make it look like the video game, make it feel like the video game, even though you kind of can't.
Come on, it's time to go do the Mario. Take one step and then again.
And that's the point here. People who made these movies realize something that it ultimately would take nearly 2 decades for everyone else to realize of you need to A, make it be the video game recognizably visually, so people are going to see more or less the characters they see from the video games, but you can't fully emulate the video game into movie form. It would basically take the next half a decade for people to fully understand this, because the movies that would try to be a little bit more like it, Warcraft, the other Tomb Raider, Rampage, the other Mortal Kombat, the recent Resident Evil, and especially, most important to our conversation here, Uncharted. All of them are very, very recognizably the video game, sometimes to an absolute fault. All of them have their own reasons for being not as good as they could have easily have been, with, once again, the Resident Evil live-action movie is just doing things so wrong, but all of them try to force in what worked about the video games into movie form verbatim, and that doesn't work either. There's of course an entire conversation to be had about this, but ultimately what works about video games doesn't work the same way for movies. Though you can, and people certainly do, watch video games online for the fact that you just want to see the plot go down. Sometimes games don't have all that interesting of an actual plot, and the plot is like said in like every couple of levels, because most of the game is walking around and shooting things and platforming, because that's the video game. You're there to experience the world because you're the person, you're the character, more or less. What makes worlds in video games invigorating, especially in these more recent times where these worlds have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, is that you are experiencing the world on your own, in your own way, at your own pace. It's really hard to take what works in a video game, which is gameplay, and put it into a movie. Yeah, you can have the fight scenes and the action scenes that are in games and try and put them as action scenes in a movie form, but it doesn't work the same way. And God knows, even just taking the cutscenes, even with a little bit of gameplay, which some great guys do on their own time, stuff like that can go for like 8, 9, 12, 24 hours, which is very long. You'd be insane to make a person wait that long. I know movies are getting weirdly longer in recent times, again, to try and like fit a lot of character development that they like feel that they need to put in there. But even then, we feel like 3 hours is pushing it. Could you imagine sitting in a theater for 8 hours to fully get all the context for the cutscenes of a video game? This is where we've come into the process of what we're doing nowadays. This is what people have finally figured out, which is two things that, again, the original Mortal Kombat and Lara Croft ultimately figured out. You take the basics of what works and you really just make your own story with them. You do take the basic beats of who these characters are, what their relationships are, what their motivations are, and you try to do your best to adapt that into movie form. All that stuff's pretty easy, as long as you have a competent director making your movie. But then you either do two things. You either go your own direction in terms of how you get from point A to point B, and hope to God that it ends up working out, or you do the thing that people ultimately realize, which just works better for stories like this and Uncharted, let's just make a TV show out of it. Now, alongside learning how to adapt it, it's the real problem with adapting like video games into movies is that there are some people that do not care. Some of the people behind it, even if they happen to be fans of it, just really don't fully grasp what works about these video games and what people like about them, and it just doesn't work out all that well. Or there's too much producer interference and they end up not being able to do so. I feel like that was really the case for stuff like Prince of Persia, and possibly the case for Assassin's Creed, which does exactly what I say you really should do, which is your own thing, steeped in what is recognizably the video games. You know, you have the White Hood guys, you have a sort of basic storyline, which works pretty well for what Assassin's Creed is, but you have this really boring, basic movie, which was clearly just, like, pooped out by Ubisoft to try and promote their series, because it was just like, what was happening here? You need someone, and you need the right support from producers and directors and writers, and have everything be this tight ship and people who really know what they're doing in terms of making a good movie, A, and B, actually care about the product. Here's the thing, the same guy who did it incredibly well with Mortal Kombat is the same guy that screwed up the entirety of Resident Evil in its movies, all right? The same guy. And here's the thing, he can make competent movies, absolutely. He was mainly in charge of the first one and the last two, but did have producer influence for the other ones, right? So it's not like it's all his fault, but he indeed is a person who very clearly did not care about Resident Evil and majorly wanted to use this as a basic idea as a platform to promote his wife. That is the point of those movies. Sorry, not sorry. Well, I wouldn't call him the, like, best director of all time. I would indeed say that there is a limit in terms of you can't just have a good director who knows how to make a at least fun movie, because you do need someone who knows the actual franchise that they're adapting, because if they don't know anything about it, or especially don't care, then you end up with stuff like the original Super Mario movie, or the original Street Fighter movie, or just movies that have basic ideas of what they're working with, but not the actual, like, heart and feel that made these games fun. This is especially the case with everything Uwe Boll made. I just want to take a quick little thing and talk about Uwe Boll. Uwe Boll is this absolute dirtbag of a man who has made the worst movies I've seen in my life. Every single one of his movies is the cheapest produced pile of garbage any human being has ever watched in their life. I swear to you, this man has not made a single good movie, right? He helps write his movies, his writing is terrible, his directing is god-awful, it's boring, it's pedestrian as all hell, and this man does not know how to make a movie at all. He has adapted multiple video games: Postal, Far Cry, Blood Rain, Alone in the Dark, House of the Dead, and then this, like, other Kingdom game series I haven't heard of that's been around for a very long time that does have fans. And he keeps getting, like, big name actors in his movies somehow, because everyone does need some work in some capacity. So of course he's like, Jason Statham, you want to work in my garbage movie? And he's like, yeah, sure, why not? This man has absolutely no respect for any of the things that it has adapted. I have seen all of them. And I know about more or less all the movies that, you know, the actual things that he's adapting. And I know what they are and what makes them charming and fun. And that shit does not exist in these adaptations of the movies. And it is so god-awful. I hate these movies so much, especially the Alone in the Dark one. That is such a disrespect of that franchise and what works for it to make it the most, like, basic zombie garbage ever. God, I hate it. P.S. Someone made a sequel to his House of the Dead movie for some reason. I don't know. Whatever. Side note, he did try to sue the people making the Rampage movie, because he has his own series of movies called Rampage, which are the most basic army bullcrap movie ever that everyone's made in their life. Simply just due to the fact that he had that have a similar name, even though the Rampage games have been around way before. So, eat a bag of dicks, dude. The man cannot take any amount of criticism. By the way, he has constantly threatened critics of his movies to boxing matches, because the man can box. So, yeah. Frankly, though, the easy answer is to say, no, you fucking psycho, and continue to shit on his movie. So there you go.
We're the Mario Brothers, and plumbing's a game. We're not like the others who get all the fame.
Weirdly enough, though, people have tried to make multiple TV shows based on video games in the past. Weirdly enough, not that many of them, mostly cartoons, especially in Japan, which sort of brings up another point of mine, which is that animated movies end up working very well for video game adaptations. I don't think it's the end-all be-all, but animated stuff just kind of works better than live action in terms of adapting this sort of thing. Video gamey aspects work a lot better in animated form than you can in live action, even with modern day effects that can do like a lot, but require like millions of dollars for that to even work. You still do need people who know what they're doing, otherwise they just have a random bunch of nonsense that just happens to look a little bit more like the games than a live action movie. Doesn't make them better movies at all. And they certainly need actually good writers, because even a thing going in its own direction can suck too. It has great animation with that Final Fantasy VII sequel movie. It's not great, not fantastic, guys. Listen, I love its animation. No. But that can be exactly what's happening with certain movies in recent times. The Sonic movie, the Detective Pikachu movie, and especially the Mario movie, even if some of those have live action aspects, they mostly use their more video gamey aspects in animated form, and they work very, very well. Some things just kind of do work better with animated stuff, and that certainly is weird talking animal stuff. And I would rather honestly a full animated thing for stuff like Sonic or Pokemon, as they have done for many decades to this point. But more importantly, TV shows work a lot better. TV shows work a lot better due to the fact that you can have multiple episodes, each of which 30, 40 minutes, which is again nearly like half or a fourth of a movie. And you can have like 7, 8 episodes in which you can take a much longer time with your characters. And though this technically is a longer time when you bring it all together, and people sure do like to watch all of it at once, the difference here is that unlike an 8-hour movie in the theater where I can't move up to take a piss, I can with an 8-episode TV show. And throughout that time, they can take their time with the dialogue and the characters and the action scenes, and it can work a lot better. The Halo series is a good case of this, of they did not know what they were doing when adapting the Halo series. But if you have the right people behind it, a TV show works so much better.
And most important,
Something that thankfully I believe we are figuring out. The Twisted Metal series was announced recently, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be actually pretty entertaining, because it's not going to be a movie. It's not going to shove in all this attempted character development into like an hour and a half on an HBO Max budget, because it's going to try to be multiple episodes.
When you think you're in trouble, you could call us on the double. We're faster than the others, you'll be hooked on the brothers.
All right, so let's get to the meat of the conversation. Uncharted: Drake's Fortune, released November 19th, 2007. It has had multiple sequels in 2009, 2011, 2016, and sort of spin-offs in 2011, 12, and sort of fifth game, kind of, in 2017. It's a big franchise that has been around for a while and was basically PlayStation's flagship for a while. It was the big game. Some of these games are thought as some of the best games of all time. I love them, and while I would debate on whether or not they're the best games of all time, they are very, very fun and very entertaining. Due to the fact that it is inspired by Indiana Jones type thing, it could be made into an Indiana Jones type movie if they do it properly. Unfortunately, rushing multiple aspects of the video games, as the 2022 adaptation did, it didn't work out. And besides the fact that they clearly cast the wrong person to be Nathan Drake, the acting for the most part was fine, and their characterization was more or less pretty accurate. Certain changes I can deal with, but it was more that they never had enough time to fully utilize what they had with these characters, their relationships, and what that really meant, and how you could really engage the audience with the characters that you had. Yeah, the action scenes were done fine, how they look a lot like the actual games did, mostly because the games tried to make it look very movie-ish, so that wasn't very hard to do. But what they really missed out on was the different character interactions and the notes you can find in the games, which you can't really do in movie form all that well. This is the reason why a TV show would have worked much better. Made by the exact same group of people under Sony, that being Naughty Dog, The Last of Us, released in 2013, is a post-apocalyptic third-person shooter all about the seasoned and very tired of the screwed-up world he's been living in the last 10 or so years, Joel finding more of an actual purpose in his life with this young girl, Ellie, who seemingly is immune to the weird zombie mushroom thing that's been happening that has destroyed the world. It's a game that, especially when you play Uncharted right before it, like I did, you can really tell the big influences that style of gameplay went into it. Lots of climbing, lots of walking around talking, lots of looking around, and then suddenly being ambushed by some people where you kind of have to mindlessly shoot till you get to the next walking and talking section, where more than likely there will be something to climb. There's a little bit less climbing and a little bit more shooting and sneaking around in Last of Us, but it's still a very similar kind of game. There's lots of dialogue, lots of characters, and lots of lore in the world to explore that would not work as a movie. Now, under the right people, I feel like a sort of spin-off type movie that's very similar to the Assassin's Creed movie, where it was just sort of its own story within the same world, it would have worked out. Whether it be about the other characters in the Uncharted series or about Nathan Drake himself going on a other adventure that happened to take place in between 1 and 2 or something, that would be cool. That would be something that could be interesting, and honestly is what a lot of these video game adaptations really should just go for, you know? Establish it in the beginning of your movie who these characters are, that they are the same characters, and why new people should care about them, and why old people should still care because they are the same characters, rather than a lesser version of the characters that they want to see. This allows for a little bit less need for having a lot of development to these characters because they're already kind of developed in the fact that the games already exist, and you have enough of an introduction to these characters that if they're played correctly, and you have the right people making it and directing your actors to feel like the characters from the games, then it would work out pretty well. But there is something to be said of taking a storyline that already exists and bringing it for a new audience that didn't already know about it, because video games aren't for everybody. There are stories that are being told in video games that not everyone is experiencing that people would absolutely love to experience. And if those people aren't watching Let's Plays of other people playing them, they're people that would be the perfect audience for an adaptation, which is the reason why these movies and such even exist at all. It's clear someone at HBO realized this and went, we can't make this just a movie, we have to make this a whole series. The Last of Us Part 1, at least, re-release of itself later on PlayStation 5, is one of the best-selling video games of all time and is also cited to be one of the best video games of all time. Well, once again, I would debate that, mostly because I suck at the game. I can tell you that the story is one of the most enriching things I've ever seen in my entire life, and it's a story that I think definitely needed to be adapted. And it's very good that it was by TV show. Now with the 2023 TV show, which is again 10 years after the release of the original game on PlayStation 3, which, oh boy, that makes me feel weird, is a 9-episode series which perfectly adapts everything from the original game. Every episode is 40 minutes, and each of them take a different look at the aspects of the world. All of them go through the exact storyline of what happens with Joel and Ellie and tells it perfectly. In fact, in such a way that I would say is better than the video game. Stay with me here. The very first episode not only begins with an absolutely insane idea of how exactly scientifically the cordyceps that are seen in this series, that being this evil fungus that takes over humans. The idea that climate change, which is happening right now, could actively affect the environment enough that it could create more deadlier versions of the species that we know now is entirely scientifically possible. And even if it wouldn't happen in exactly modern day, it's still something that I feel like, hundreds of years from now, when none of us are alive and the world's sort of dead, possibly. But yeah, 2003 is where the present but also past beginning of the first episode is. Joel is living his pretty typical life, and he lives with his daughter Sarah and more or less his brother Tommy. They live in their nice quiet Texas home. We see Sarah going to school, and it's all very quiet and slow, but very interesting, and it gives a great funny look into these very likable characters that to a new viewer you would think this was our main cast, and kinda. And then, of course, as the episode goes on, things start going crazy, people start going crazy, because what they don't realize is they're infected by evil fungus that want to bite people and shove their fungus inside them to try and control more people, to make more fungus. Things go absolutely buck wild. Our main three try to leave, and they nearly do. They are stopped in the middle of it. The two brothers are separated, and Joel tries to leave with his daughter, and then they're met by a soldier who, in the saddest way possible, shoots them down thinking that they're infected, trying to make sure that nobody gets out of this quarantine zone. And this little girl who we basically followed through the entire day to learn more about who she was and her actual cares and wants dies in front of us. This was in the game, but it was a very quick segment. We'd basically just like begin with Sarah waking up. We don't get to see an entire day in this character's life to like know who they were on a regular basis, and that's what makes this version of this event so much more heartbreaking. That's ultimately what this TV show does. It takes its time in letting us get to know the main characters in a way similar to the video game, but tries its own thing with it. It tries to expand in certain ways which would only really work for movies, more so than a game would do. A game would naturally focus more on the actual gameplay aspect of this, the player and their lack of control in this situation, and they would focus on that. But focusing more on the actual emotional, slower parts of it is definitely something that a movie or TV show can do a lot better than a video game, which naturally needs the player to actively want to keep playing it. Ultimately, the next few episodes go pretty much similar to the video game. We see the 20 years later world absolutely destroyed. It's been ravaged by people who are trying to survive, and they make their own areas because that's all they really can do, now that mushroom people have basically taken over the world. Joel is now with this woman Tess, who they have a sort of relationship with, which is a little bit more clear in the actual show than it is in the video game. And they're met by this group called the Fireflies, who are going up against the sort of tyrannical government that remains in America, and they ask them that if they could bring this little girl who they don't realize why they're doing it, and they're asked to bring this little girl of some importance to this meeting point, to which they accept, thinking that it'll be something really quick and that it wouldn't really matter. Soon enough, finding out that they are in some much deeper shit than they could have ever realized. And as in the video game, nearly eaten by some mushroom men as we go to see the absolutely horrible state of the world that our characters are living in, and the eventual realization that Ellie is, of course, had already been bitten and that she is immune to it all. Having Tess give Joel a real reason to continue onwards, as Tess fully realizes that this could easily be a great thing for the world. This is the state that they're sort of left in, as Tess then also realizes that she had been bitten and she needs to stay back to make sure that the two actual main characters are able to survive and keep moving. Just like Tess in the video game, we don't get that much time with Tess, yes, but we do get enough time and enough dialogue that we do see the relationship between her and Joel and why Joel did care about her. That is enough, both in the video game and in this TV show, to really care when she has to sacrifice herself. Sure, she isn't the, main character of this series, but we have enough time to genuinely care about this relationship and the fact that this is the last we see of her. Yes, the TV show is way more freaky in the way that it has Tess be nearly eaten by a bunch of zombies, because one tries to make out with her and put fungus in her as she has them explode. The two do continue onward, and unlike the video game, where they just kind of meet this random weirdo Bill who happens to be laying traps all over the place, and they get through them, they meet him, he helps them shoot some zombies and some raiders before they leave to the next area. We spend a whole episode finding out about this character's backstory and his relationship with the guy who in a video game was a one-off little thing that we know nothing about, but in this show, something else entirely. Bill and Frank are given an entire backstory, both from the early parts of the beginning of the outbreak all the way till recent times, and we see their entire relationship unfold right in front of us. It is a fantastic, emotional episode that genuinely had me way more emotional than I ever wanted to be about this character that I kind of didn't even like in the video game. I mean, in general, this show can be given a lot of praise for its performance, but damn especially with these two characters who genuinely feel so absolutely in love, which brings you to the point of definite tears by the end of it. If you have not seen this show, this is the episode you have to watch. Hell, you could basically watch it on its own as its own separate storyline, and it'd be totally fine. That is how absolutely fantastic Long Time is. Leading up with Henry and Sam. Henry and Sam, oh my god, the absolutely great episode, is a great retelling of the events of the games. It's a lot more exact to what the game was, for them teaming up, them exploring, and them having to deal with the crazy raiders, which then suddenly adds in a whole bunch of zombies attacking the raiders to sort of have a different version of them fighting the raiders, as in, instead of just shooting them with a sniper in the game till all of the enemies are dead, you now have to have them trying to escape the big old zombies, which of course includes the big boy, the bloater, an actual enemy from the game, which actually looks like that and is terrifying. And just in like the video game, the exact next morning, they find out things aren't going well, and it's so sad. Ellie and Joel find this duo that they basically fully relate to, that are going on a very similar journey to them, and they feel like that these are the kinds of people that they want to trust. And you know what? If they're going to go on this big journey, they need someone with them. These are the people that they could consider friends in this horrible world that hopefully will get better, and they can help these people make the world better with them. And you just have this hopeful like note of, yeah, we got friends, we got a group going on. It's like, nope, Sam's bitten, and he's a zombie. And you have this absolutely horrifying moment both in the video game and the TV show where Henry has to just try and decide what he's even going to do with his life now, as he just instinctively tries and stops Joel from killing his brother, and has to take a whole second to realize he can't help his brother anymore. His brother is gone, and after killing his own brother, he kills himself, and now our duo has to continue on their own. But with all this sad stuff going on, what still happens in the show is that we do get these great moments, these great quiet and drawn moments with these two main characters learning about each other. They not only learn about each other, but they grow with each other. Joel, this reclusive man, continues to grow and to open himself up to the only other person that he feels like he could ever understand, simply due to the fact that she reminds him a lot of his daughter. And she quickly becomes his new daughter, and he finds more of a reason to keep going and to keep surviving and to keep trying to make a hope for the new world, because he genuinely begins to have a reason to. And same goes for Ellie, who at this point had been seemingly ignored and forgotten by everyone, finally finds someone who she feels like she can trust for once, and actually finds herself having a father figure when she never had one in her life at this point. Someone who isn't just going to use her and like leave her. And you genuinely feel this, especially feel this in episode 6 when Joel finally gets to where his brother is. You find out where his brother has been. You find out that there's some other places that people have been living in these many years. I wish they spent a little bit more time here, and it's not my favorite way they adapted this part of the game into it. And very similar to the game, Joel tries to tell Tommy to take Ellie for him, but then realizes that no, this is his daughter. This is his responsibility now. And very soon afterwards, as the two begin to set off on the last leg of their journey, Joel is nearly killed. We quickly go into the adaptation of the DLC, Left Behind. Left Behind, both the name of the DLC and the episode, is going back to the time before Ellie had ever gotten bitten. The time when she was working for the recruits of the tyrannical government soldiers, basically being forced to do so, as she's met by a person who was once her roommate who had left a while ago. A person who had been missing for a while, and who decides to take Ellie on this fun little adventure in this abandoned mall. Personally, I love this version of the storyline way better than the video game, also due to the fact that the video game version of it had you just like do some QTEs as they pretended to play a fighting game, while on this they just turn on the power and they're fighting through Mortal Kombat. That's much more interesting to me. It tells basically the exact same story of this one last little night of fun and the last little bit that Ellie ever had to enjoy herself for the past several years. And the two genuinely connect as they have a clear relationship. The two of them are the only two people who had ever understood each other throughout their whole lives. And this nice, cute moment is immediately interrupted by a stupid mushroom zombie biting both of them. And the two of them decide that they're just going to die together. And as described in an earlier episode, Ellie, of course, survived this. She found out that she was immune, that she didn't die, while her friend turned into a monster to which she had to kill. Through this, you can see the absolute desperation of this character and her desire to be cared for and be actually wanted, as everyone she's ever known has just disappeared from her life or has died. And you continue this feeling in the last 2 episodes, as she then has to deal with this crazy evil cult of people who either bring you to their cult or eat you, as an even more like molester-y feeling version of the leader of said cult is a lot more obvious with his intentions in this version of it. But very similarly, Ellie is able to fight her way all on her own, showing that this massive amount of growth. Oh yes, she had some training, didn't really know what she was doing, and wasn't really the kind of person you could trust with a gun, is now fully working on her own and is kicking ass all on her own. There's a little bit less zombie shooting in the TV version, which I'm totally fine with because part kind of felt like it was a waste of time anyway. This part of the game, by the way, is where the funny clip is from.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Thankfully enough, Joel is able to survive his injuries and he's able to get up, and the two of them have this great reconnection, which is immediately juxtaposed by the beginning of the next episode. Ellie's mother, Anna, is in fact bitten right when she was pregnant, and though she's able to cut out Ellie before Ellie is also a zombie with her, this is ultimately the reason why Ellie is immune. This is never given in the games. It's only ever just that she was, right? And seeing that technically a part of the mold thing is inside her, it just isn't like fully connected to the weird mushroom hive mind or whatever. Plus, we see that Anna was part of the Fireflies, did know Marlene, and this is the reason why Marlene really cared about Ellie. This revelation of that Marlene had been part of Ellie's life for a long time and clearly does care about her comes immediately soon after Joel and Ellie get to the main place where the Fireflies are, where we get to the ending of the show. The absolutely fantastic conclusion of both the original video game and the show happens with Joel killing all the Fireflies to get Ellie out of there. And that's such a crazy and challenging ending, which is absolutely fantastic and beautiful. Because in general, there's gonna be some people who are like, oh, stupid, but like there is nobody who is going through this part of both the show or video game with an easy answer or easy feelings of like, yes, definitely, this is fine. And whether it be the just dredging fight scene that you have to go through the video game or the slow motion shootout that is in the TV show, you have this moment of, holy shit, what am I doing? What's happening? What am I gonna do? And that's all you really can feel, because what would have been the right answer? And what's more interesting is that this is just what was gonna happen this whole time. With the fact that Ellie is immune, even when you disregard what they added for the TV show, how is she immune? This isn't a virus. This is a part that seeped inside the very human body. The fact that the mushroom stuff is inside her means that it's connected inside her body more than likely into something important, as in the brainstem as it is in both versions of this story. It's this realization that you come to at the end of the show where you just realize that there was not going to be some nice, happy ending. They weren't just going to snip it and leave, right? They weren't just going to like take a syringe and take something from her and that's it. Ellie needed to die so that others could survive, and Joel was never going to accept this. Whether or not you agree with what Joel did, you have to fully understand, as you have played the game or watched the show, that this is exactly what Joel was always going to do. You understand that this is a girl that he has cared for like a daughter, and he cannot lose that again in this world of absolute garbage. And like in the video game, he's able to survive this, kill everyone in there, and especially kill Marlene, which regardless of which version you're looking at, is still this emotional moment that you are never going to be fully sure how you feel about. This is a story that could have never been adapted into a movie. You need this time, you need this world to expand, you need slow moving plot with these two characters to grow not only on each other, but on you as a viewer or a player to fully understand why this story works the way it does. That conclusion alone is what is the reason why this could never be a movie. Imagine sitting there 2 hours with them going on an adventure and Joel doing that. It wouldn't be as good. But when you sit there for multiple hours, probably multiple days, as you had to stop, do other things throughout your day, and then come back to it another day, you had fully grown to this world and these characters, and that is what allows you to fully take in the storyline. That would have never had happened with a movie. It's a lot of work, and all it takes is the right people with the right ideas, and that's definitely what this TV show was. They knew what they were doing. You can see by the behind the scenes stuff that they knew how to get the best out of their absolutely great actors that they thankfully pretty much rightfully casted. And hell, they literally got cameos from some of the voice actors to show up. Troy Baker was there. Ellie's voice actress played her mom. That's awesome, dude. I love that kind of thing. Fans were behind this, and that is what needed to happen. Stuff that adapts video games needs fans to make it for fans. And that is what I absolutely love to see and hope to see in the You'll need to chop them up. You'll probably have to go your own direction, but some things could work in a 2.5-hour type thing or even less. But there are certain games that just work so much better for their long storyline with this slow burn that needs to be a thing like this. Even if we fully figured out, at least I think so, not only what needs to be kept in and what needs to be added in, to change it a little bit for video games to become movies or TV shows, but that more importantly, TV shows just are the better way to go about it. Hopefully this kind of thing continues on as time goes on. And while, you know, animated stuff is clearly the better way to do it, live action still has the potential to do this sort of thing. Live action video game adaptations, even of the weird stuff, can still work, and especially with modern day effects, good lord. Whether it be movie or hopefully TV show, I hope we continue with this trend that we've been going on in making much better adaptations. From the looks of it, anime adaptations are trying their hardest to be a little bit better, but I'm not entirely sure about that. They have the same problems, again, like video games, regardless of what country they're being made in. But whether it be whatever season 2 this show will hopefully get, or whatever sequel that the movies that have been around the same time will probably get, or whatever new adaptation for TV show or movies we'll be getting, I hope we'll continue this trend of really fully being able to understand what makes these video games and the characters within them and the weird entertaining parts that lay within the gameplay to put them into live action or animated form for movies and TV shows. But that was my big overview on why video game movies and TV shows have been much better in the recent years. As mentioned, I hope it continues this way, but hey, if you enjoyed this video, then go ahead and leave a like and definitely subscribe to check out any of the other stuff I'll be doing in the future. Again, as I mentioned, Street Fighter lore very soon, hopefully, but more importantly, leave any comments of what you feel about this video and what you feel about The Last of Us, and don't talk about Last of Us 2. I swear to God, internet, I know what you are. I swear to God. Most importantly, stay good, stay safe, don't be an asshole.